Thank you, Lebo. Now, Willie Labuschagne's new book, titled The Soul of a Lion, Reflections on a Life Lived with Animals, has been described as a must-read for wildlife and nature enthusiasts. The book recounts Labuschagne's many adventures and experiences, such as the time he spent on a diamond mining barge in Namibia to helping carve out the Otter Trail in the Tsitsikamma Forest, as well as his travels to all the major national parks in Africa. To tell us more about this and many other details as he narrates them in this offering, Willie Labuschagne joins us now via Zoom. Willie, a very good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation.
Now, speak to us more about this book and why you felt like now was the right time for you to share your story with the public.
I think I should start by saying that my father was the Deputy Director of the National Parks of South Africa. And as a child, I actually grew up in the national parks, be it the Kruger, the Kalahari, Ogravis, you name it, that's where I grew up. And to me, life after school was basically to register for a degree in zoology and entomology, and that took me to the Kalahari, where I conducted research on the cheetah in the Kalahari Desert, and then thereafter joined the Johannesburg Zoo, and my life just continued to be a life full of humor, emotions, and suspense. And people who know my stories kept on saying, Willie, you just have to put this in writing. It took me a long time to decide on that. This book, The Soul of a Lion, in itself took me 3.5 years to complete. My second book is 60% complete, and it's actually just the succession of the story. So I've been very, very careful, particularly with the research part, that it should not be a research publication. I shared some wonderful experiences that I've had in the Kalahari, and later on also in the Johannesburg Zoo as director.
Now speak to us about this soul of a lion spirit that you have embodied for years and how it sort of manifested into you becoming the celebrated wildlife conservationist that you are today.
You know, I've lingered a lot about the title, The Soul of a Lion, because there are many people that would immediately jump to the opportunity to say, an animal does not have a soul. And I'm not going to argue with those people, but there is something in an animal that I have experienced through years and years of interaction with them, that there is something. And I think Lawrence Anthony, in his well-known book, The Elephant Whisperer, puts it very clearly. There are things that we have to understand that we will never understand. Even Majorca, the deep-sea diver, once said, until man has learned to respect and talk to the animal world, he will never know his role on earth. So what I'm doing is sharing with the reader wonderful opportunities where I, not only domestic animals, but with the wild animals, came in close encounters with them, and which tells me that there is something in an animal that we don't understand. Emotions, whether you want to call it a soul or a spirit, whether people will think dogs have their own heaven, which some people do, of course. A soul has a very serious religious context on the connotation. And that is not what I'm trying to argue. What I'm trying to bring across to the reader is that there is something in an animal that we have to understand, in the words of Majorca. And I'm sharing those experiences and allow the reader to make up his or her own mind about it.
Now, in this book, Willie, you share that your love and passion for animals and nature was ignited by your father from when you were just 8 years old. Yeah? Tell us more about this.
Well, you know, my father joined the national parks when I was 8 years old as an information officer. And he was popularly known as Lapis, well known by the older generation. And he did such a lot of work for the conservation of our wildlife in South Africa. And that installed in me just an obvious, immediate passion about the environment. There was, for me, nothing else to consider in life, and that is to follow in his footsteps. And that is why I actually lost my father when I was working in the Kalahari. It was such an emotional thing. So my father was my mentor throughout my life. And I'm happy that I could actually fulfill his own dream by going in the way and following in his footsteps. And And in retrospect, I've just had an incredibly fantastic life. Not that I've created it. These are things that happen. In fact, when I arrived in the Kalahari and I had to do research on the cheetah, I had no means of radio telemetry or drones or all these wonderful techniques that people use today. I had to do spoor analysis, spoor interpretation, which was first of all rejected by the university. The doyen of the Kalahari line, Fritz Ilov, said to me, Lapis, my nickname, there is no way that the university will accept a scientific thesis based on spoor interpretations. And I had no choice. I had to go back, and I appointed the Bushman trackers, and we had a wonderful interaction with the Bushman trackers. Not only did they teach me how to interpret, how to follow the science, but it made me part of the environment, as they are. It's just a wonderful experience to live with the Bushmen there. And I'm talking about the other days, a long time ago, when it was really rough and tumble. And to, other than the pristine beauty of the Kalahari, to just survive in an area as desolate as the Kalahari, and you feel safe in the hands of the Bushmen.
Right,
so they actually, they introduced me and made me part of their life. And that, to me, I've said it many, many times, that my master's thesis that I eventually obtained on spoor interpretations is but factional to the actual fulfillment of my life to live with these Bushmen. And wonderful interactions I've had with them. They became bored after a while. You know, they're following the cheetahs from morning till night. Yeah. Didn't make sense to them. And I then had to reciprocate. They taught me their art, and I had to teach them how to drive a Land Rover. They've never been behind the steering wheel in their whole life. So I share all these anecdotes with the reader, the serious confrontation I had with dangerous animals, lions. I should have been killed on more than one occasion. It was just a wonderful, wonderful life's experience that I had in the Kalahari. And these stories I share with the reader.
Yeah. You know, earlier on you mentioned something so profound that we need to understand that animals do have emotions. Now, tell us more about how during your time as director of the Johannesburg Zoo, you and your family hand-raised a number of newborn wild animals, including lions and a bear cub.
Regularly. My children grew up with carnivores in their house, and they share their beds with them. In the evenings they slept. It was just for them, for both my children, a wonderful experience. But the one that you touched on, that was actually the inspiration for my title, The Soul of a Lion. The first animal that we had to hand raise was, my daughter called it Sebastian, but I called it Obas, just my nickname for him. And Sebastian grew up with us until he was about 9 months old. And he was part of the family. He loved the house, he loved the children. And I realized that some of the time, the time to say farewell will come close, and which had happened. We were on holiday, and I had to take Sebastian to a quarantine camp, and eventually from there to an outside enclosure. And the children was absolutely in tears, because that was their soulmate. And then there is a time that I actually isolated myself from Sebastian. It was very emotional, incredibly emotional. I didn't want Sebastian to see me and not return to the house.
Yes.
He wouldn't understand that, if I can put it, almost being anthropomorphic. He wouldn't understand it. Why could he see me and he could not follow me? And months thereafter, I was exposed to the situation where, because the veterinarian had to inject him, I had to actually face the issue by, after months being separated from Sebastian, go into his enclosure without any assistance from the staff. And that moments that I, emotion, full of suspense, just to it. When he realized and recognized me, jumped up with his paws around my neck.
I'm afraid we've got much time, and unfortunately we need to end this interview. But thank you so much for joining us. And what I quite like about this book is that it will allow us to to highlight our role in terms of preserving the environment for future generations. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Joining us via Zoom there is Willie Labuschagne, and we've been talking about his new book titled The Soul of a Lion, Reflections on a Life Lived with Animals.